Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Angelina, and I'm medical doctor. Also, I'm co-founder of MillGens Health and Wellness Club. I'm very excited to have you here today at this Art of Happiness virtual event, the very first and hopefully one of many more events of MillGens. I will say a few thoughts about MillGens Health and Wellness, how you will benefit from this, and then hand over to Leona Deakin, who will speak about how to improve your ability to bounce back and remain resilient in this era, more challenging times. Leona is a registered occupational psychologist and expert in leadership and resilience. She has advised a wide range of organizations you couldn't believe, from the police and prosecution service to the Red Cross. In addition to conducting independent research into the psychology of self-made millionaires and women at board level. She is also the author of the Detective Bloom thriller series with Penguin Random House. Amazing, Leona. Books are really, really good. You are also able to submit your question during this event in the live chat window just below the video stream. Feel free to repost this evening using hashtag MillGens Health and Wellness for you. So let me tell you about MillGens Health and Wellness Club. With our functional medicine and integrative well-being approach, we bring together over 1,000 experts from all over the world to help you, your families, and your colleagues to promote healthy living decisions. As your global membership club, MillGens helps you achieve the safety, vitality, and connectivity that you and your close ones truly desire. Our aim with our events to help you develop a holistic, integrated approach to well-being. After all, what is wealth without health, well-being, and happiness? Okay, so how do we do that? We provide a platform for individuals and businesses to offer a complete 360-degree view of cutting-edge information and services about health, wellness, and ultimate happiness. We involve university professors, medical doctors, molecular medicine specialists to produce scientific hand-on views. So, MillGens Health and Wellness events. We host large virtual and physical events for experiential learning and engagement on how to live a good life. Good life, so important today. And on this note, let me hand you over to Leona. Leona, hello.
Hello, hi. It's lovely to be here with MillGens at their first health and wellness event. I'm very honoured to be asked to speak to you all. I'm going to be talking to you about something very topical for us all at the moment, which is building resilience, which is very important when we are facing stress and pressure and an ever-changing world. So I'm going to talk to you for the next 20 minutes about how you build your own resilience and some really powerful tools and techniques for how you can alleviate the stress and pressure that you might face in your life and become more tolerant to it. The first thing to say about resilience is it is not in any way the avoidance of pain, of stress, of psychological pressure. In fact, if you didn't feel any of those things, if you didn't feel anxious or scared or angry about some of the stresses and strains that come your way, it wouldn't make you resilient. It would actually make you a psychopath, which is very different. So what is resilience if it isn't avoiding stress or avoiding any psychological pain? It's actually more about the ability to bounce back. And if I told you that our most resilient adults have typically had the most challenging childhoods, you can straight away understand that this is not some born lucky talent that people have, the ability to be resilient. It's a skill, and it is a skill that is learned through adversity. So the more adversity people face, the more resilient they have the opportunity to become. However, there is a cautionary side to that. Not everybody, as you will probably know, who's had a challenging and difficult childhood, grows up to be a resilient adult. You know, there are some maladaptive things that we can do in terms of ignoring what's happened to us, not learning what's happened to us, repressing our emotions and our memories of things that might have been difficult for us. And these don't make us stronger, they sort of just keep us in a very similar space. What I want to talk to you about today is how you use the adversity and the stress that you might experience in your various lives and professions to make you more robust and resilient for the next challenge that comes down the line. So before we do that, we first have to understand, why on earth do we feel stressed in the first place? I mean, this is not a helpful experience for any human being, is it? It's the sort of thing that makes us, it affects our sleep, it affects our ability to make rational decisions, and it makes us emotionally reactive. So it is not at all helpful when you look at it from a modern day perspective. However, if we understand where it's traditionally coming from on a very primitive level, then we can start to see where some of the solutions might be. So a stress response is first and foremost part of our fight and flight mechanisms. So this is the stuff that keeps us alive. And when we feel stress and pressure, it has two significant impacts on us. It has a physiological impact. We get a burst of hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, which make us tense. They do things like sending blood to our hands to ready us for the fight, and blood to our feet to ready us for flight. You know, this stuff is there to make us ready to go. And then it also has a psychological effect on us. It floods our brain with our primary emotions, things like fear, anger, sadness, disgust, surprise, things that take our thoughts away from maybe very rational intellectual musings and make us look at something where we can't look away from it. And the result of that is it makes us really like ready to survive a physical challenge. We become tunnel visioned, we become physically tense, ready to move, and we become psychologically alert. This is really good if you have a threat to life situation, which is fundamentally where that system was designed to succeed. And it does amazingly well. Unfortunately, for most of us now, the stresses that we face are not things that we can run away from or physically fight. They're things like the pressure of work, the volume of work, the complexity of work, difficulties in our personal relationships, global pandemics, things that we cannot escape, we cannot physically run away from. And the problem this has for us is that when we have chronic levels of stress, so when we are constantly in this state of physical and psychological readiness, alertness, it starts to make us sick because the body cannot function at that level of stimulation for a long period of time. And so what you get is lots of stress-related diseases like high blood pressure, strokes, and heart disease that come from this sort of overexerted system. So this is the essence of stress, and that's why we have it. But it also gives us the answers to how we can improve our tolerance for stress, because we know it's having a physiological impact and we know it's having a psychological impact. So straight away, we have two arenas where we can start to tackle it. But before I get into some powerful tactics for that, on a big scale, it has to be said that human beings are extraordinarily tolerant to stress. We are really good at adapting and learning and growing from challenges placed in front of us. It is why we are the most successful species on the planet. We're very good at fighting against adversity. However, this is only when it is in a pattern of stress, rest, stress, rest. Because the brain, much like a muscle within our body, is best trained in the same way that you might, let's say, decide to run a marathon. If you wanted to run a marathon tomorrow and you went out and ran 26 miles, it would not only hurt you, it would probably do you some damage. What you know you would have to do is over a period of weeks and months, you would have to put efforts in to practice running further and further. And in between those periods of effort, you rest, you recover, you recuperate. And the next time you go out, the muscle is stronger. If you think of the brain in a similar way, then our stress responses work best when we can put this pattern in of stressor, rest, stressor, rest. So when you are facing stresses and pressures in your life, as many of you might be today, think about how do you carve your day and your week up so that you intersperse the stress experience with rest. And rest isn't just sleep. Rest is a change of activity. It can be variety. It can be just moving away from the circumstances that are stressing you and giving yourself change. Change is as good as a rest. It's a cliche for a reason. So moving away from the stressor is a very powerful, fundamental tactic. But what I wanted to introduce you to, there are lots of resilience building tools and techniques that have been developed by doctors, psychologists, mental health professionals. But I want to introduce you to 3 that I think are particularly powerful for getting a very quick handle on your own stress levels. And these relate to that physiological response and that psychological response. So the physiological response first. So when we get flooded with these hormones, cortisol in particular, this is something that can be very damaging to our system. Yeah, so it makes us physically tense. You can feel it in your fingertips. It stops you from sleeping because, well, let's face it, it thinks something's coming. It's part of your fight and flight mechanism. So it won't let you go into any deep level of rest where you can't be easily awoken in case it comes to get you. So cortisol is there to keep us awake and keep us alert. But more and more and more and more cortisol is a leading cause of those factors that affect our health: strokes, heart conditions, blood pressure. But it's super, super easy to get rid of it because cortisol only makes you want to do one thing. It only wants you to do one thing, and that is to move. Now, I don't mean pumping out hours in the gym or even training for that marathon. So 20 to 30 minutes of gentle exercise, walking, jogging, cycling, preferably outside in the fresh air, significantly reduces the levels of cortisol in our system, which means that we can rest better, which means that physically we feel stronger and more rejuvenated to face the next bout of stress that might be coming our way. So again, like with your stressor rest rhythm, also think about how you introduce movement into your week and into your day so that you are not just sitting in the same place getting more and more of that cortisol just pumped into your system because you're constantly working at this chronic level of stress. And then we have our psychological techniques. So psychologically, the brain floods our cognitive, rational, intelligent thinking centers in the brain with primary emotions. Like I said before, fear, anger, sadness, disgust, surprise. And these demand our attention. And they affect our problem-solving capacity and our decision-making. Everything becomes very emotionally fueled. So you know that if you're angry, if you're scared, every interaction you have, every decision you make is coloured by that particular emotion for a good degree of time. But more damaging is that when we face chronic levels of stress, when we are constantly feeling like we're fighting against adversity, is we can start to feel really helpless. So we start to feel like there's nothing we can do. So COVID-19 is a classic example, isn't it? How many people around the world feel like there's this invisible threat out there? I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's going to harm me. There is no vaccine for it. There's nothing I can do to fight it. And people start to feel, oh my God, this is just, it's pointless. I'll just stay in. I won't go out. I'll hide away. I won't do anything. Because you start to feel like there's nothing you can do to change your sort of survival chances or change your experience of that negative environment. And this can spiral very easily into sort of mood type disorders and potentially depressive thoughts. And so we need to tackle that potential for helplessness. And the easiest, most effective way of doing that is to take action and control the things that you can. So this is the first psychological tool to build your resilience, is to start to think about how you take better control. And when you take control, I want you to think about control in 3 spheres, like 3 sort of concentric circles. The outside circle is the stuff you have no control over whatsoever. So when we look at the global pandemic, this is the fact that there is a virus out there. There is no vaccine against it. The people of power may or may not be making good decisions about it and controlling it in the best way. And the press are fear-mongering and sort of scandalizing. And you know, we can invest so much mental energy in that stuff that we have no power to change. And it can be draining and it can be wearing. So the tip with that sphere of control is to turn the volume right down on that stuff. Make sure you're not investing too much of your time and mental energy railing against or thinking about the stuff that you have no control over. Just let it go. The next sphere in is other people, your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbours. I mean, again, how much stress do we get out of this? These people that are just winding us up. Why are they behaving that way? Why are they putting themselves and others at harm? Why are they being so fearful? Why are they not doing this? Why are they doing this? And we can feel really frustrated. And this can, again, just build that sense of frustration and stress and anxiety in our systems because people aren't doing what we think they should. But let's be honest here. You might be able to appeal to their better judgment and you might be able to influence them with some good intellectual arguments. But fundamentally, you have no control over their behaviour. That's their discretion to change what they're doing or change how they're thinking. So again, be aware of how much time and mental energy you're investing in railing against what other people are doing. And this brings us to our core circle, the bit that you have ultimate control over. You, your thoughts, and your actions. And focus on those. Think about, am I thinking about and behaving in ways that are helping me to cope with this pressure and stress in a constructive way? Or am I doing things that are making me feel worse about it? Am I spending my time doing constructive things? Am I making sure that I'm getting good exercise? Am I talking to people who put things in perspective and make me feel better? Am I taking action, putting new routines and new things into my day that are helping me to get through this difficult phase? And am I learning from it? Am I paying attention to what helps me on a day-by-day basis and what hinders me? And am I doing more of the former and less of the latter? So really start thinking about what is in your sphere of control, how you are thinking and how you are behaving in relation to your stressor and what tweaks you might be able to make to that. And fundamentally, one of the biggest things you can do is make sure that you're spending time doing things that are productive and constructive, which brings us on to our second psychological technique, which is turning up the joy. So you might hear people saying when you're facing difficult times, oh, cheer up, look on the bright side, make the best of it. And these things sound like cliches, but fundamentally, our happiness, the joy we feel, is part of our fight and flight system. Remember those primary emotions? Fear, anger, sadness, disgust, surprise? Well, there's another one over here. Little old joy all on its own. The only one that's to do with happiness. Why would that sit in our fight and flight system, in our survival system? It's not just so that we have happy lives and feel satisfied with our lot. No, it's about surviving. It is the engine room of resilience because joy makes us brave. How? Well, if you think about a physical threat to life and you survive it, the brain gives you a burst of endorphins as powerful as any heroin hit because that is addictive and it makes you want more of it. So the whole system is set up to push ourselves into harm's way, fight and survive it, then feel joy as a result of achieving against adversity, and that makes us feel more embodied to go back in to the next fight. So the survival system is set up as a resilience building mechanism. So turning up the joy is extremely powerful. When you're in a situation where you're feeling hard done to, helpless, stressed and anxious, to push ourselves into harm's way, what you want to do is focus on doing things that make you smile, appreciating what you have and what you are thankful for. If you have hard days at work which are challenging and mentally exhausting, make sure that then you rest your brain by doing something that brings you intrinsic pleasure. That might be playing a musical instrument, socializing with friends, watching a movie, reading a book, whatever. We all have different things that work for us. But turning up that joy is a powerful insulator against the stresses that you are experiencing. And it's also another rest, isn't it? So if we think of the stresses in your life, then you rest by taking yourself away from the stressor, by exercising and moving within the stressor, and by introducing pleasurable things to do in between periods of stress. These are all things that help us to go back into the next phase of challenge, feeling stronger physically and psychologically. And if I can give you a personal example of this, which sort of relates a little bit to my other job as an author, these are not just theories. I have actually used these things and on quite a powerful way for me personally, because in 2008 here in the UK, we had quite a significant recession, and overnight all my consultancy work went away. I was faced with 4 months with nothing to do at all. No money coming in, nothing to do, stuck in the house. And literally within days, I started to feel quite helpless, very stressed about how I was going to cope, and really low mood. And I knew that I had to take control and find the joy. I knew I had to do something productive with my time. Otherwise, I was just going to mope around, feeling sorry for myself for potentially months at a time. So I decided on a whim to write a story for my sisters as a Christmas present. Now, bless their hearts, they got this story for Christmas and it wasn't very good and they had to smile and they had to read it. But for me, it was very powerful because it gave me purpose every day. It gave me routine every day. And also because I'd always loved stories and I always loved words, I was intrinsically enjoying the process of writing a story. And so it was a bit of escapism going on, but also something where I felt I was achieving something and I had purpose to my day, which distracted me from that reality of this is quite a scary period of time and you don't know when work is going to come back. So these things can be really powerful for getting you through a difficult time. And from my point of view, not only did it help me in that period of time over that 4 months, but it also gave birth to a second career. So after much practice and persistence on my writing skills, 10 years later, I got a deal with Penguin Random House to write the Dr. Bloom series. So it sort of gave, you never know what your attempts to do in difficult times to just get yourself through it, what opportunities and doors they might open for you in the future. And so to sort of summarize, there is no one size fits all with this stuff. What works for me in terms of writing a book or going for a run or whatever, watching a movie might not necessarily work for you. You have to pay attention to the things that help or hinder you. And this takes time and it takes practice. You have to sort of have a go and give things a chance. And then if you find that things are making you feel worse or not really helping at all, bin them. And the things that you're finding are helping you and making you feel stronger, introduce more of them. But fundamentally, when it comes to building your resilience, there is a truth about how we do this. First and foremost, adversity builds resilience. So you have to push yourself out of your comfort zone and face that stress. Otherwise, there is nothing to learn from. But once you're in that stressed situation, remember, rest regularly, move regularly, control what you can control, and turn up the joy. Have a go at doing these things if you're finding that you're experiencing levels of stress and anxiety at the moment. Make sure you persist with them for a good few weeks or months and see what difference they might make. Personally, I have found them and seen in my clients and organizations I work with, they can have a transformative effect to how people feel about challenges that they face. They feel more confident going into them and how quickly they bounce back on the other side of them. So I hope that's proven interesting and informative for you. And I'm looking forward to responding to some of your questions. Thank you very much.
Leona, thank you very much. Amazing speech, as usual. So, and also I feel already stronger and more resilient already, so it's amazing. Now, my dear friends, this is the time you can ask questions to Leona. I will be picking up on some of the questions you have been writing, and we can hopefully address a good few of them. The first question from Karen London. So, how do I build my own resilience? Was the first question.
I suppose it's just those things that I was just saying. It's about being aware that resilience isn't about avoiding any feelings of stress or pressure. It's about your mindset and your behavior while you're in that state. Looking after yourself physically, making sure that you are well rested, that you're getting fresh air and that you're moving. And then protecting your psychological well-being by ensuring that you give your brain some downtime and you give it some relief from that sort of feeling of stress. Give it something pleasurable to do and to think about, and avoid, the brain will pay attention to what we tell it to pay attention to. If you're constantly watching the news and stories about how awful the economy is and how there's no jobs out there for anybody, then that's what the brain's going to be thinking about, and that's what you're going to be thinking about. So it's turning down the volume on those things that actually are not very helpful. Because if you are, let's say, in a situation where you're job hunting, you've only got to find one job for you. It doesn't matter how bad the world is. You've only got to find one job. So ignore how bad the world is and focus on what you can control, how well you present yourself to potential employers. That's the sort of thing, really.
That's great. Thank you very much. So another question. How long it will take to build the resilience? Alex from London asking you this question.
Yeah, it's not an overnight thing. So, these things are habitual. The way that we think about ourselves and the world is habitual, and it's been learned through our lives to date. So if you're someone who is prone to feeling quite stressed and anxious or a bit down and depressed when the pressure's on, then you can't just decide, I'm not going to be like that anymore. You actually have to work at it. And I think quite a nice sort of analogy really is weight loss, I always think, because, if you're someone who's put weight on over a number of years, a period of time, maybe as a result of pregnancy or a particular lifestyle, if it's taken you like a year, 2 years to put that weight on, you can't expect to spend a week sort of drinking some milkshakes and that weight's going to go away. You've got to, in comparison, think, well, if it's taken me that long to put weight on, it's going to take me a significant amount of time to get rid of that weight. And again, similarly to training up a muscle, it's going to take a long time. So we're talking about weeks and months of persistent practice. If you want to change your mindset around how you cope with stress and pressure, you need to practice thinking differently. You need to start paying attention to negative thoughts, shutting them down, and forcing yourself to focus on something more constructive. And eventually, it will become habit, but not overnight. It'll take a good deal of time before that happens.
So it's all about positive thinking, right, Fiona?
To a large degree, it is. It's positive sort of psychology, really, and a positive mindset. It's that, taking control of how you think and realizing that you are in control of how you think. Now, obviously, our negative emotions, this feeling sad or feeling angry and fearful, they're there for a reason. So if we're experiencing those, it isn't about repressing them. Pay attention to, why am I feeling like this? What's triggering this? And so it isn't just about always being happy but it's aware that joy is part of that same system, and it is a good insulator and a good sort of fight against some of those other more negative emotions. But we've got 4 negative emotions: fear, anger, sadness, disgust, 1 neutral one, surprise, and then joy. So little old joy's on its own. It's got a lot of loud voices to fight against. So you've got to really pay attention to turning the volume up on that happiness scale.
We have another question, which is very interesting. How do you step away from the stress when it's caused by your immediate responsibilities?
Yeah, and it is that, I suppose there's 2 sort of elements to that, isn't there? It's physically stepping away and psychologically stepping away. You know, so physically stepping away is how can you remove. So you mentioned at the beginning about doing the work with women at board level. So these were ladies who have very, very big jobs, high levels of responsibility and accountability. And one of the things that they, pretty much all of them, had in common that they said to me was that when they are at work, they are 100% at work. So any issues with the family or the home, someone else is dealing with that, husband, nanny, whatever. They are 100% at work.
Completely 100%.
100%. But when they go home, they're 100% at home. So their phones go in their bags.
One thing at a time, right, Leona? It's the one thing at a time. That's the secret, right?
One thing at a time, yeah. And so physically, it's thinking about when do I change environments, which will give me a physical break from whatever responsibilities I have, but also how can I turn my mind off? You know, to what's going on over there.
Subconscious. Leona, is the mind or subconscious?
Absolutely, yeah.
Subconscious. What they turn, mind or subconscious? Okay, let's go to next. Thank you very much, Leona. Let's go to next question, which is actually very interesting. Okay, Maya from London asking you a question. Leona, you work with the police, which must be very stressful. Actually, I have a friend who is working with Scotland Yard as well. Are some people better suited to such stressful job than others?
Yeah, they are. I mean, like I say, resilience is predominantly a learned skill. So I think most police officers would tell you that they're more resilient 10 years into the service than they were on day one. Absolutely, because they've learned better coping techniques and they've learned about that situation and they've watched colleagues who are more experienced and stolen their tactics. So it is largely something we learn. But fundamentally, personality-wise, you do get a sort of continuum of sort of anxiety. I suppose some of us are more naturally anxious than others. So, for instance, when you're recruiting for people to work in air traffic control, you look to find people who don't have a high sort of panic level or a low panic level. Sorry, you want them to be able to stay calm when those two little dots are moving towards each other and not to just sort of lose it. And there are certain personalities that are just along that scale more sort of steady state, emotionally suppressed. And like I said at the beginning of my talk, if you go to the end of that scale, you do start to get psychopaths who actually don't have any emotional experience going on at all, really. And it makes them look incredibly calm and collected and stress-free. But they're not resilient because they don't have any stress. So that's very different, isn't it? So yes, there are some people who are better suited to stressful jobs, but all of us can become better at those same jobs as well, in my experience.
Okay, thank you very much, Leon. Another question, that's actually very interesting. So another question, so can someone make these changes by themselves or need people like you to help them support to do it?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a little bit dependent on character. I think most of us find it easier with support. I think if you want to change how you think and how you behave, you almost need someone to bounce off. You need someone to get feedback from who can say, oh, I'm still seeing you or I'm still hearing you, using those same sort of thought processes or those same behavioural techniques that you said you were going to try and not do anymore. So it's useful to have that other person who's a bit of a mirror or a bit of a sounding board, I suppose, for what you can try. But there are certain personalities, very introverted personalities, who are quite self-reflective, who can do this stuff on their own, but they tend to be the more deep thinking, quiet souls who will just sit and ponder and maybe write, and they're their own sounding board. They're in a minority compared to most of us, I think, fare better with help.
Do you know, thank you very much, Leona. Do you know about this medical scientific thing about the noradrenaline and dopamine overlap? Do you think the people with a high resilience level, they are kind of have high dopamine level? What do you think? Do you think like molecular medicine is the resolution for depression and all those kind of diseases, or do you think it's all practical thing which you can use in your life to actually improve yourself?
No, I think there's both things going on, isn't it? And I think, you know, we understand a lot about the body and we understand a little about the mind, but there's still so much for us all to learn. And I think one thing that I've appreciated more working in the field of psychology is how complex these issues are. It's very hard to sort of pull them apart and say, well, this is just a biological thing or a physiological thing, or this is just a psychological thing. You often find that there's sort of multiple factors that are within any individual that are playing a role. And certainly whether you are someone who has a sort of very heightened nervous system and are more prone to feeling anxious and jumpy, then yeah, you have a very different experience to someone who's naturally just quite chilled out and doesn't get much of a physiological response to things. But then on top of that is how those people think, you know, which is then sort of either improving that resilience more or almost counteracting it, because they maybe have this underlying potential to be resilient, but then they have flawed thinking, so they don't sort of capitalize on it, or they have a very nervous sort of natural state, but they have a very powerful mindset that helps them to cope. So, you know, I think it's always a mixture, and every individual is an individual. And that's what I mean about there isn't one size that fits all. You have to understand you and what your triggers are and the things that help you become more resilient. And learning about those things is where the answers are, I think.
I actually agree with you. Majority of people can be helped by people like you, and then don't need medical intervention. And the medical intervention is actually needed just for a very small percentage of people. I completely agree with you. So we have another question, which is very interesting. So we know to Leona, psychotherapist, building resilience, helping women be more powerful, and Leona, who actually created those resilience fictional hierarchies. And you actually explain to us a little bit how actually these two things are connected.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose they're connected in some ways because of my background working with police and prosecution and seeing those sort of mysteries going on. But resilience-wise, I think the characters that run through my books, the same three characters run through all the stories, and they're pretty good illustration of what resilience is and isn't. So I have a psychologist, come private detective, an ex-spy who works with her, and a psychopath who is her nemesis. And if you look at those three characters, you can sort of see who is resilient and who isn't. So our psychopath, as I've said before, looks resilient, absolutely looks resilient. Nothing shakes this person. She's cool, calm, rational to the nth degree, but actually is closer to artificial intelligence than an empathetic human on some levels. She's not resilient because she has nothing to be resilient to. She doesn't feel anything other than the odd spike of anger, really. And then we have the ex-spy, who you'd think, well, this person's seen and done things that the rest of us never have to, has faced challenges and adversity and survived them, so has the potential to be an incredibly resilient person, like some sort of James Bond hero. But actually, he's not, because he's just sort of ignored it and pretended it didn't happen. So he's repressed it all, pushed it all, locked it all away in a little mental room, doesn't think about it.
He's the worst one.
This is the worst thing, yeah. And on the surface, he's very charming and very funny and very laid back. But then you see these sparks of emotional reaction where you think, goodness me, what's going on there? Like this man has a volcano that's waiting to erupt. And someday something's going to trigger it. So he's not resilient, even though he had the potential to become resilient because he's faced lots of adversity. And then we have my protagonist, I suppose my hero. She's a psychologist, like me, but very different to me character-wise. She's very introverted. She's very reflective. She is emotionally controlled. She's someone who's faced hardships in her life, but she's used them to learn about herself and others. And that makes her a really excellent people watcher. She's very empathetic. She can see what triggers people and what people's motives might be. And that makes her a great investigator and fun to write. But fundamentally, she's the only one of them that's truly resilient because she's the only one that's learning. She's the only one who's paying attention to those emotional triggers and then trying different ways of harnessing them. So I think writing resilient characters is about being truthful. They have to be as flawed and as fearful as the rest of us. But what you want to see is that inner struggle, which the reader can see, because in writing, amazingly, you can show what's in a character's head. But then you can also watch her behave in a way that's not necessarily in line with that internal struggle. So you can see her being resilient in how she behaves, despite the fact that her emotional reaction was something you can empathise with. And so hopefully that shows that she is the more resilient of those three characters. But obviously I'm just putting her in lots of situations that's really testing that theory and trying to break her as much as I possibly can.
Actually, we have another question. Thank you, Leona. Very interesting question. What are your thoughts on submitting affirmation videos on YouTube? Are they effective to help review the brain?
Submitting what, sorry?
Affirmation videos onto YouTube. Are they effective to help review?
It's not really my area of expertise. I wouldn't really know. I'd have to sort of look into it. I can't say that I would have an intelligent answer for that one. So
maybe we'll tell them after the event.
Yeah, I could have a little, have a bit of research into that. It's not really my field.
Okay. So the last question, and we finish with the questions. Now, many people, they are losing the ground and they cannot stand on the ground, right? So would you actually help, would you help them as on personal level, or would you run the events for groups? Would you consider to run the events to help like group of people to build their resilience, or you think the most effective way is to do one-to-one sessions?
Both of them. I think there's two levels to becoming more resilient, isn't there? There's an educational level, and there's a behavioural level. So educationally, things like this, talks, seminars, workshops, training courses, they're great for making people understand how much control and power they have over their own resilience and giving them some tools and techniques to have a go at. But as I said in answer to the first question, actually changing your own behaviour is really challenging, and you typically need support. So then on that level, if you really want to drive change in someone, having a coach, either working with you individually or group coaching type things, can work very well within organisations where people are facing similar stressors. Then that, you can't compete with that. That's extraordinarily powerful in terms of helping people really make progress. So it depends whether you just want to educate or whether you fundamentally want to change behaviour.
That's very, very good point. Thank you, Leona. So thank you again for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
It's amazing, amazing. Really, I learned a lot. Thank you very much. And remember that I'm a medical doctor, so I know quite a bit, but this is really good. Don't forget the hashtag for the event, MillGens Health Wellness for You. Don't forget about Leona's amazing books.
Yes.
And then you can see them behind of Leona as well. That's very interesting. Close gone. I'm really interesting. So also you will be receiving follow-up emails that will highlight 10 exciting events focusing on different aspects of happiness. Please follow our page on LinkedIn, MillGens page, and have a fantastic weekend. Stay happy. This is the most important thing. Stay happy. See you soon. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.